I firmly believe that when we take the broken pieces of our life, we can put them into a mosaic that can be art, and it will be inspiring to people, healing to others.
It's about time because we're going there.
Who doesn't love a little bonus? My name is Bianca, and I'm the podcast host for We're Going There. And every once in a while, I love to join other people's podcasts. And so I was invited by my friend Jordan Montgomery on his podcast, Growth Over Goals. And we got to discuss topics like leadership, health, resiliency, and things that we need to develop in order to grow. In addition to that, I give his listeners a little bit of a sneak peek of a new project that I'm working on and just starting. And so why not share it with our podcast family? I hope you enjoy this podcast. If you want more information on Jordan, you can click the show note links for ways to follow him and ways to listen to his podcast. Thanks, friends.
Welcome back to the Growth Over Goals podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Montgomery. And today I'm with a game changer, a dynamic leader, a woman who's coloring outside the lines and defying the odds. She's a best-selling author of Grit, Don't Quit. She's also the podcast host of a top-rated show, We're Going There. Speaker, believer, lead pastor of THFOC from Orange County, California. Welcome to the show, Bianca Olthoff. Good to be with you.
It's so good to be with you. Thank you for that generous introduction, friend. Wow.
Well, listen, you're making moves. You're stepping out in faith. You're making things happen. There's major transition in your life. You're working on your next book, but you decided to spend the next 25, 30 minutes with us. And we want to honor that time. So thanks for being here, friend. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm privileged.
Bianca, people watch you move and they watch you operate, whether it's from up close or afar. We were talking offline about maybe your greatest asset, which could be your greatest liability. You just shared that with me, that you're quick to speak. You are bold in how you move. I'm curious, is that something that's always been a part of who you are?
You know, it's so funny. When we're talking about leadership, the question of is it nature or nurture always comes up. And I think I've been reckless with my tongue since I was a kid, but stepping into maturity, wisdom, education, learning, being knocked down and humbled more times than I'd like to admit has given me a little bit more of a good muzzle, I would say. But yes, I have been outspoken since I was a child. I think through the years have learned and applied wisdom around that. But I love speaking the truth. I think that life is too short. You're moving too fast to sugarcoat conversations with people. Like, let's be honest and let's speak love. And I think that speaking love is when we're honest. So yeah, I'm pretty
well
bold,
said.
friend.
Amen. Amen. Hey, Brad Lomnick connected us. We joke sometimes that this is like the Brad Lomnick podcast because he's introduced so many guests. But that's one thing he shared about you. He said, hey, Bianca's really bold. He also called you authentic. And he shared also that you're an overcomer, that you're somebody who's had to transition and restart and fight through things. And so you're talking to a whole bunch of leaders today on the Growth Over Goals Leadership podcast. Before we talk about overcoming obstacles, I want to ask you this question. When did you first identify with yourself as a leader? When did you first know you were a leader?
You know, I would say that I put the language and understanding around leader probably just about 5 years ago. But when I look back at the arc of my life and the arc of my story, I've always been a kid that was out in front of the pack. So around the age of 13, I started getting really involved with sports. And naturally, I became captain of all the sports that I played. But I think the twist for me was I became captain as my freshman and sophomore year of high school, which is very rare because usually that's reserved for juniors and seniors. But I never identified myself as a leader because I was the unconventional leader. I was a girl, a brown girl. I'm a first generation American. So this concept of leaders always felt reserved for a particular gender, a particular color, a particular financial class, of which I was none. So I didn't self-identify until I started building, leading, and learning and realizing, look, wait a minute, I think my definition of leader has been skewed by previous models. And a leader, to use John Maxwell's definition of leader, is a leader is someone with influence and who people follow. And if that is the definition, then yes, I am a leader. And my goal is to be the healthiest version of a leader that I could be.
Love that response. You faced challenge for all of those reasons you just described, and you sort of defied the odds. Talk to us about some of the earlier challenges in your leadership journey.
So my story is going to be different from maybe a lot of your listeners, but I am a first generation American. I am Mexican. So my dad's Mexican, my mom's Puerto Rican, and I was raised in Los Angeles, but in not like West LA where the bougie people live, but East LA where there's more people of color. The food is better. I will give it that. But my story is definitely peppered and pockmarked with a lot of pain. I think when you grow up in the concrete jungle of East Los Angeles, life just looks different. I also struggled academically. I didn't know I had ADHD or learning disabilities when I was a kid. I just thought I was stupid. So I couldn't read, write, or spell adequately. And I'm 12 years old. So I think statisticians would have put me as a female, as a daughter of immigrants, struggling academically, in a category highest prone to failure. And yet it was something that I looked as a challenge that I embraced. And there was this part of me that wanted to prove them wrong and prove myself right. I'm also a person of faith. So from a very young age, my parents were teaching us Bible stories, and I would see what God would do in impossible situations. And I would dare to believe that if God did it for them, why couldn't he do it for me? I don't know where this chutzpah came from, but I recently discovered that I'm 1% Jew, or as I like to say, I'm Jewish. So my chutzpah is really because I am a chosen child of God. And this idea of like, wait a minute, if God did it for my faith fathers and faith mothers, why can't he do it for me? So in taking biblical principles and leadership lessons from today, it's kind of molded my version of the leader that I want to be and the people that I want to lead and how I want to lead from that place.
So good. I had a leader once say, you're most qualified to help the person that you used to be. And so you dealt with challenge at a young age, but certainly had influence, and God continued to expand your territory. So I'm curious, as you work with young leaders today, like, what do you think are some of the major challenges facing young emerging leaders who aspire to have more influence in today's America?
So for some, this might feel like overkill. For some, this might feel revelational. But one of the things, so the staff that I lead at the Father's House, Orange County, is very young. And we have a very young church, that's a whole other anomaly, another podcast for another day. But it's beautiful to see so many young people, and I feel very called to the next generation, see so many people want to step into positions of leadership. But I think a missing component is this idea of time. And we are in a microwave culture where anyone can pop something in and pop out a superstar. Reality TV has exacerbated this when we see the rise and influence of the Kardashians, the rise and influence of reality star people who become influencers online, and then they become, marketers because of it. So I think the misnomer for this next generation is there is a shortcut. One of the most beautiful attributes of learning and leading from the 18th and 19th century is artisanship, where someone would become an apprentice. An apprentice would take many years to learn the art of the craft, whether they were a cobbler, whether they were a composer. There was this time that it took to develop these skills. And this next generation doesn't look at time as it being a great teacher. Time is something that is a hurdle that we have to get over. And I would love to see this next generation develop and hone quietly, patiently, and slowly, so that what is learned really metabolizes deep within, so that when challenges come, when trial, trauma, tribulation come, it's not the thing that's going to take them out. So we're seeing this empire, specifically within the realm of Christianity, this empire of these top leaders that are imploding. But are we giving these next generation leaders the tools to have fortitude deep within, that when life hits us and when obstacles come, that this is not going to be the thing that disqualifies us or discounts us, that we remain though the waves keep on coming? That's one thing I would really love to communicate to the next gen.
So good. You're already preaching on the Growth Over Goals podcast. I'm here for it. It's like you wrote a book about grit, best-selling author of Grit, Don't Quit. You've helped people stay healthy, in their leadership journey, personal development, professional development. You and I both share this in common, that we work with folks on just health, leadership health, organizational health. Talk to us about some of the challenges that you see with leaders staying healthy, and then how are you helping people remain healthy on their leadership journey?
Okay, so we see this if we look historically over what leadership has looked like over the last, let's just say 30 years, not even the last 100 years. The advance of the internet, the advance of technology, the advance of smartphones, everything has made us so connected all the time. So boundaries have been something that have absolutely been erased or muddled at best. And so because of that, I think it's taken a toll on creating space to create, creating space for health, creating space to process, creating space to dream. And all of that is removed because we're constantly under the ding, the ping, the update, the email, the text. So the cacophony of voices and the cacophony of information, I mean, even beautiful things like podcasts and YouTube videos, these are assets to develop us. But because there's so much noise going on, it's really hard for leaders to pause and say, wait, what are the things that I'm called to? What are the gifts that I'm meant to employ? So I think one of the things that I've been really wrestling with for myself is setting personal boundaries for what creation looks like, what rest looks like, and what health looks like. For this next generation, I am big on making sure that there is set boundaries even in our calendar. So I like I said, I deal with a lot of young, and by young, let's classify because young could be 50 to somebody. Young for me in our organization is 60% of our staff is under 30. That's like a huge, that's a good number. And so many of them have never been taught the power of managing their calendar. So things like color coding on Google Calendar, so that you could actually see what is your rest time, what is your work time, how much are you spending in meetings, how much time are you spending creating. And so really walking through really good, healthy boundaries is helping the next generation really put into practice this idea of organization, that organization is meant to help you create, not to be a hindrance. But let's talk about soul health. For leaders, I think soul health is going to be something that is going to be a game changer. I'm learning this not just through talking about it or studying it, but employing it into my life. I have gone through a really hard season, a lot of loss in the last 2 years, Jordan. And the greatest gift has been the power of the pause. Some people might use the word Sabbath or sabbatical. Some people might just say, rest. For me, I've been very intentional about setting margin for silence. And I just recently came off of an entire month off. Like that feels indulgent. That feels almost reckless for some people listening. That might sound stupid, or some people listening are like, well, how did you pull that off? A lot of savings, a lot of wisdom, and a lot of preparing. And so what I will say is this isn't something that I just took a month off for kicks and giggles and went on vacation. It was not a vacation. It was time getting healthy, meeting with a counselor, meeting with a therapist. Also, he's a performance coach to make me the strongest leader I could possibly be. Shout out Dr. Wayne Chappelle. I mean, I love him. It's between Jesus and him. I mean, it's making me a strong leader. And also the power of resting my body. And so I think good leaders will employ the power of rest. And from that, which is a counterintuitive principle, is where we will produce more. And I have seen such a shift in the last 2 years of employing. I actually have one day fully off. I went to Israel. Like I mentioned, I'm Jewish, friends. Yeah. And I went to Israel, got to speak to a rabbi, and he spoke to me about Sabbath and how he broke it down, not in a legalistic way, but Sabbath is you love your life and you love your God and you've accomplished Sabbath. And so I do not work on Sabbath. I have fun. I cook, I play tennis, I work out, I hang out with friends, I celebrate my family. I read for leisure, which I know for a lot of leaders might feel indulgent. But when I wasn't doing those things, I found myself creating art that I wasn't happy with, being a leader that I wouldn't want to follow. And now I'm in a place where I feel like the more that I rest and the more margin I have, or as I like to tell the staff, the best gift I can give to you is the healthiest version of me. And I'm living proof that the health of an organization, it mirrors the health of the leader. And our organization is in a really strong, healthy place. And I think it's because I've taken time to really invest in getting mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially healthy.
I think so often we forget that rest and recovery are a part of a productive and impactful life. Like it's not just about being healthy, but it's also about being productive and contributing to the world around you. You mentioned going through something difficult. By the way, if you don't follow Bianca on social media, give her a follow. I think you're a really encouraging voice. I think part of the gift that God has given you is the gift of encouragement. There's always folks who are going through something. In fact, everybody who listens to our show is going through something. I would love for you to encourage some leaders, this whole idea of grit, don't quit, like God's best is ahead of you. You've lived that. I think you're a walking, breathing, living testimony that God's best is yet to come and is ahead of you. And would love for you just to breathe some life into our listeners right now. For the person who's maybe hurting, struggling, going through something, what would you say to that person?
I want to be thoughtful and wise with my words, because I think when speaking about tenacity and perseverance and resilience, it can come off trite. It could be like a Pez candy pushed out of a dispenser in thin. And we really want to just pause for the leader that does feel like they have been knocked down, for the leader that does feel like the best has passed, for the leader that feels like they've been overlooked and under-resourced, for the leader that feels that their opportunity is the boat that pulled off the dock an hour before they arrived, for the leader that feels like they are just dry and parched and they have nothing else to give. I want to resonate with that person and say that not only do I see you, I've been you. And I also want to breathe life and say, especially if they are a leader who follows Jesus. No, not everyone who listens to the podcast is a follower of Jesus, but specifically for those that do, I believe that redemption is always possible, that healing is always a possibility, that restoration is meant for us. And for those, I think the reason why I'm so passionate about this concept of grit is because the greatest leaders that we have seen in human history are the ones that persevered, that though they have been knocked down, they were not knocked out. And that those who continue to fight are the ones that continue to take ground. I think the healthier version of me is now saying that there is a good time to let go and there is a good time to walk away. So for the leader that does feel like, is this the end of the rope? The end of the rope for one season doesn't mean that it's the end of your life. And going back to this idea of health and rest and restoration, we have lost, when we hit the Industrial Revolution, we lost the beauty of seasons. And so much, it went from like fields to factories. And in a field, it takes time and things produce and the ground follows and there's rest. And yet we went to the Industrial Revolution where we're in buildings with light and no windows and it's constant production. And sometimes I think that we can get lost in the sauce. I think that sometimes we feel like our value is so tied to our work where we lose the sense of self. And so for the leader that does feel like I'm at the end of my rope, one, take hope and courage that redemption, restoration, hope, and healing is possible. And number two, what if this is your great restart? What if this is your opportunity to say, this season of my life is done, but there is a new field for me to harvest. There's a new field for me to sow seeds into. There's a new field for me to reap a benefit that I didn't see. And so I want to speak to those that kind of feel like the end of themselves and say, the end of a season could be the beginning of something beautiful. And that could be in a new field. So I'm living proof of that.
So good. I just watch you speak and connect with other people. And I think part of your aura and part of what you stand for, I think, Bianca, you're a hope dealer. You do hope, you offer hope, and Jesus offers hope. And I think you've been a great messenger and a carrier of the hope message. So I want to speak that over you. I also want to ask you this question. You are a young leader who grew in influence at a very young age. That's obvious to the world that kind of watches you move and operate and preach. I didn't know that went all the way back to your high school days of being a freshman captain. What would you say to the young leader who wants to grow in their influence? So they'd like to have more opportunity. They'd like to lead at a higher level. We have a ton of thoughts here as we work with leaders, but I want to hear it from your lens when you're coaching a leader who wants to have more opportunity, grow in their influence. What do they need to work on? What should they be focused on in their leadership journey?
When dealing and speaking and pouring into this next generation of leaders who want to learn from somebody who's maybe just a few years older than them, it was actually, I'm going to steal somebody else's content. It's help build someone else's dream until you're able to build yours. And I worked for a woman named Christine Kane, a profound communicator, a world changer, a global thought leader. And it was, we joke around, we're still friends to this day. It felt like death. I'm honest to God, Jordan. It was like 7 years of death, like dying every single day. And she would even say, she's Australian. Like, Bianca,
so good. She's great.
What is like death? It's death to self always. And when you feel like you're dead, you die some more. And I'm like, oh dear Jesus, I can't take this.
That's a great impersonation.
I learned so much from her. And I think I learned from her and I was able to serve her. And in serving her, it made me the leader that I am today. Again, I keep on going back to this like apprenticeship concept of like help someone else. And in helping them, it helps you. Now, we don't serve so that we can benefit, but there is a natural benefit. There's a natural pour over in being in somebody else's slipstream. So if there's a young leader out there that's like, hey, how do I get to that space? I'm going to say, serve somebody ahead of you in the position and place that you want to be, and watch what you learn by serving them.
So
Again,
good.
I'm cautious with the word serve, but it is a powerful principle. Not only is it a biblical principle, it's a powerful principle in secular and sacred spaces. And so build someone else's dream until you're able to build your own. And that has been somebody's wisdom that they gave me years ago. And if I remembered who it was, I would give them credit. But until then.
Hey, that's great. I'm gonna pause there for a second, because somebody's driving down the road and they need to pull over to write that down, or you need a minute to grab a pen. Serve someone else's dream until it's time to build your own, or you're able to build your own. Mark Cole said this to me recently. He said, a bit of a different way, but he said, make a leader's agenda your agenda for a season. Caveat to your point, it's got to be with a pure motive and a good heart, right? That you're not trying to just get something out of it, but that you're truly there to serve and add value.
Absolutely.
Bianca, this interview could go for 10 hours. You're just dropping wisdom and gold. I so much appreciate your time. Listen, I want to tease this out just a little bit, because I'm not sure the world knows this, but you told me and I'm about to tell everybody else. So I hope that's okay. Here I go. You've got a new project, a new book that you're working on. True?
It is true. And literally, you are the only person besides me and my assistant that actually know, but I'm working on my next book. The working title, I don't think this is the title, but the working title is going to be Whole, Rebuilding Your Life When It's in a Million Pieces. And it's not going to be a leadership book per se, but I think all leaders have broken parts of us that we kind of have to keep covered, or sometimes I hate to say hide, because we're afraid that if people knew these broken parts of us, that they wouldn't want to follow. But I firmly believe that when we take the broken pieces of our life, we can put them into a mosaic that can be art, and it will be inspiring to people, healing to others. And so that's the next project that I'm working on. There is not a release date, but I love that we get to drop it here to your listeners.
Well, by the time this gets released, there'll be a bunch of other people that know about it. So to the thousands of people you just shared it with, thank you for sharing. There's another future best-selling book that's in the works. Let me also ask you this. Outside of the book, what's next for Bianca? What are you excited about?
So we are in the middle of rebranding the church that I get to be a part of and lead. And it's so beautiful to see. I think I don't just say I believe in the next generation. I really want to empower the next generation. So I've been working with a lot of our key young leaders at church, and we are working on a brand new website, new language, new values, new key concepts. I don't want to be a leader that is on the saddle too long. But I also don't want to turn over the reins and let it be reckless. And so being able to walk alongside this parallel journey of rebuilding something is a dream, and I'm super excited about it. I love seeing that there's men and women coming together, different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, financial stages. We get to come in and build something beautiful from the ground up. And so I'm really passionate about what we get to do there.
Well, I'm excited for you, and I'm also excited to collaborate. I know you've always wanted to come to the great state of Iowa. So my wife, Ashley, and I are so excited to host you at a leadership event in Iowa. We do have an event coming up in a couple weeks with John Maxwell. So we do bring some folks to Iowa once in a while. And I feel like God is calling you to the cornfields of Iowa, Bianca. So
well, listen, say less, brother. You want to know why? Because you are throwing shade at Iowa, but Des Moines is one of my favorite cities because it houses one of my favorite people. So Parker Mason Fultoff is a football player at Drake University. So I'm actually going to be in Des Moines in 3 weeks. I love that kid. I'm going to support him. And yes, because he's there, I love the great state of Iowa.
The world gets smaller. Unbelievable. Well, listen, I'm kidding, but I'm not really. I mean, I think your ministry and the work that God is doing through you is so special and unique. And you are bold, but I think you're also real. I think you're authentic. And I do believe that God's best is ahead of you. And I know that you're in a season of transition and you're navigating some things, but I just want to say this, you're doing it with grace and with a lot of class. And I think you're doing it in a God honoring way. And I'm honored that you would spend some time with our community and help us get better over the last 30 minutes. So thank you just for investing in our crew, for sharing some leadership gold and some truth. I'm behind you. We're rooting for you. Anything else that you want to leave our listeners with before we sign off?
Leadership is one of the greatest privileges and the greatest gifts. It will require the most of us, and it will cause sometimes the greatest pain. But the reward may not be seen or felt or heard on earth, but I do believe in an eternal blessing that we receive when we get to love and lead people well. So the best gift that you can give to others is the healthiest version of you. So lead well.
So good. Well said. What a gift this was to share a conversation with you. Bianca, we're behind you. Until we see you in the great state of Iowa, God bless you. Talk soon.
Thank you.